We read the last chapter in this book, Global Challenges in Anthropological Perspective. So first, we'll talk about some of the global challenges, and then we'll talk about the anthropological perspective. I want to start out with this word, challenges. Now, there are certain things that are challenges. For example, settled life preceded agriculture is an interesting challenge to live in a settled place. That's a challenge, I would say. Is this the best word to describe what we are facing today? Are we having challenges today? Consequences. We need a bigger word than challenges for this title, which they do use in the book, but what do you think? What should we use? They call it, I think they should retitle this with something they put on the first page. We are facing existential crises. Challenges are like, it's hard for me to write this paper. I'm having trouble with my brother. But existential crises, that's probably more akin to what we're facing. So we don't want to get, of course, we never want to get depressed in this class, but these are some pretty big things. Now, one of them, of course, we know about climate change. Of course, climate change is it's kind of just the world warming up a little bit, right? It's all going to be cool. No? What is it? What's going on out there? Everything. I like that. That's good. Everything. That's good. As they say, it's not an abstraction. It's not just theory anymore. People are feeling it in their lives, even in our own places of the world, even in cold climate Oneonta, getting this smoke drifting in from the Canadian wildfires. So we're starting to feel it in various ways, even in places that thought they were sheltered from it. So as they say, this is not an abstraction. This is actually happening. One of the other, we might say, crises or existential threat is the extremeness of the inequality between different regions of the world. Massive growth and definitely good things that have happened in terms of the growth, but the growth of the population and the kind of maldistribution of the resources have led to massive amounts of inequality. And of course, we see that in terms of the refugees and those kinds of crises. Many people believe that in the coming years, we are increasingly going to see what are called climate refugees. So this is going to be the inequality between those who have been relatively well off and those regions which have been left behind seems to be a pretty existential crisis. So we see this issue, and again, it's the lack of being able to confront these crises because some governments and some peoples see their autonomy and their independence constricted by the rules that are set in the global system. This also applies to rules on where people are allowed to live and migrate and work. This only exacerbates inequality. We also see an inequality within nations. So as we saw with the comment about some people setting rules for others between countries, we also see that within countries where certain people get advantages and then they exclude others, or others are unable to participate in the system. Who is feeling the climate change the most within some of our own countries? Who is feeling it first, you might say? Native population. Yeah, so this is something that is happening in people who have been pushed to the margins of places that are already difficult to live. They use the term First Nation peoples, which is something you heard perhaps more in Canada to describe indigenous or native peoples. It's a term that they have adopted rather than Native Americans. For those of you who've been in my Latin America class, the whole name of America, of course, comes to us from a European explorer. So the idea that people should be named that way who are already here, sometimes they don't like that so much. So some of them have adopted the idea that they are First Nations here. But the point of the matter is that for many of the people who have already been marginalized, people who live in in island communities and have nothing really to do with global warming in terms of producing this stuff are actually the first to feel it. We also see the pace of change. What's happened to the pace of change? What are we seeing over the years? How fast is it happening now? It used to be slow. And so as PowerPoint shows us, it's accelerating, it's getting faster and faster. All right, people are in some ways seem unable to keep up with the pace of change. So it's not that things haven't changed in the past. Of course, the world has always been changing, but there was the olden days, you might say, there was a rhythm to it or a slowness to the pace of change. And now this seems to be accelerating across the world. There's also again, a funny thing that's going on, which some people have termed financialization. One of the disturbing things about our times is that you can bet on all of these things, right? And so people will make these investments and then there'll be a sudden swing, and like the pace of change, it causes these ups and downs. But we have reached the point, it seems, that you can bet on anything you want. For those of you who are all invested in Bitcoin right now, what are these things we are seeing? I believe, or other people believe, and I'm just using the word, that everything is now casinoified. That is to say, you can bet on all these things, and the derivatives market or the side bets are almost as big as the event itself or the investment itself. So we're seeing this rise of the idea of short-term bets and short-term gambles in investments, in sports, and perhaps in life itself. All across the world, people would like to live like those who consume high amounts of energy. What happens when everybody wants to burn energy? Yes, the idea that current levels of consumption, and this is smart to point to how this has happened often. Colonialism or the colonization of other countries, often resulting in the extraction of their resources, was an early instance of this. And now we are seeing kind of its effects in many different places. Guess this perhaps is wrapped up in our consumption of energy and the things that we do. The question of pollution and toxic waste. We often think about nuclear waste, but even bigger than nuclear waste, chemical waste, yes, which I don't like. That sounds yucky. What's the answer to the chemical waste? I don't know the answer to this either. I was hoping I would be able to tell you the answer, but what I can do is to try and help you out now with the anthropological perspective on these issues, which is not an answer, it's a way of trying to think about these things in the world. I want to start with something: every act of creation, every act of development. Every act of development necessarily involves an act of destruction. Sounds pretty extreme. I'm going to change that a little bit to say that whatever we do, and there's where the anthropological perspective comes in, there's always going to be trade-offs. So you always have to think about, okay, is this going to be good, or what are we going to win and what are we going to lose? And we've talked about how one of the things that hopefully we can do, anthropological perspectives, is think holistically, think about the whole, think about how these parts are interconnected, how our different things that we do are connected to each other, and how we are all connected to each other. That anthropology hopefully teaches us that our fates, or the fates of those who may seem distant or far away, are actually intertwined. Or as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put it, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I've talked a lot about the wildfire smoke that we're inhaling around here that came from far away. We can see this with the pandemic, that what starts in one place cannot be contained there, that we cannot ignore places and wall them off and hope that those problems will never affect us. Anthropologists believe that those peoples who we have been marginalized, who have been socially excluded, be that indigenous peoples or those who have been excluded based on their race or their social class, their gender, their sexuality, that those people are actually our best source of knowledge and wisdom about our world and about the things that are happening and about the ways in which we can live more sustainably. And I hope we believe, every so often we get confused about this in anthropology, but that wisdom, having that wisdom based on life knowledge is more important perhaps than just having intelligence. And it's a lot more important than that other thing that's been going around that they call intelligence, like AI, like artificial intelligence. So I would say it's better to be intelligent than to be artificially intelligent, and better than that is to be wise. So anyway, I'm not going to get too down on AI because I like it, but it is worth putting it in perspective of what it can do, things that are going to solve all our problems, but didn't seem to. On the subject of inequality, one of the main messages of anthropology is that it hasn't always been that way, and it is not necessarily a natural or a part of human nature. We have seen different populations, foragers, horticulturalists, agriculturalists, pastoralists. We've seen that they have different political systems. We have seen that some of them are relatively egalitarian, others might be more unequal. But the point of the matter is, it's not built into the human condition, and it hasn't been going on for all time. We are not destined. It does not have to be this way. And finally, that long-term thinking that we can look at over hundreds or thousands of years is going to be better than the short-term gambles and the short-term fixes that often cause other problems. So anthropologists don't necessarily give us solutions. We may have specific solutions in specific times, but it's more a sense of gaining an overall perspective on our world and hopefully applying that or taking that perspective outside of the classroom and what we learn. You do not have to be an anthropologist to apply an anthropological perspective. You don't need to know anything about it. You just need to be able to think differently and put this perspective into action.